The blade kissed his throat before I felt it, the snap, the pull, the lightning strike of recognition that sent my wolf howling. My hand froze. The silver dagger trembled an inch from Joshua's skin, catching firelight as his eyes locked onto mine with a hunger that made my knees buckle and my training dissolve like smoke. He moved before I could breathe. His hand wrapped around my throat, not to kill but to claim, thumb stroking my racing pulse as he dragged me close enough to taste rain on his breath and feel heat radiating from scarred, battle-hardened muscle. "They sent you to kill me," he whispered, against my parted lips, his voice rough with possession and dark satisfaction. "And now you are my mate." The bond exploded between us, ancient, undeniable, absolute. My body surrendered even as my mind screamed denial. Every nerve ending blazed with need, with belonging, with a truth that shattered 16 years of Kale's careful lies. I tried to pull away, to remember my mission, my loyalty, my purpose. But his next words destroyed everything I thought I knew. "They lied to you. I am not a rogue. I am an alpha, and the one who trained you to kill me is my enemy." I was 7 when Kale found me wandering the forest with blood on my hands and no memory of how it got there. The pack elders said I emerged from the trees like a ghost, silent and hollow-eyed, my dress torn and soaked crimson. They said I didn't cry, didn't speak, just stood there with my small hands dripping red onto the moss, while search parties combed the surrounding territory for bodies they never found. Kale took me in when no one else would touch me. He called me his foundling, his gift from the moon goddess, a survivor marked by tragedy and destined for greatness. The pack whispered different words when they thought I couldn't hear. Cursed, broken, dangerous. A child whose family had been slaughtered by rogues, contaminated by violence too young to process it. But Kale silenced them all. "She will become the hunter who protects us from the monsters," he announced before the full pack assembly, his hand heavy on my thin shoulder. "She will turn her tragedy into purpose. She will be our weapon against the rogues who took everything from her." I believed him because I had nothing else to believe in. No memories, no past, only the nightmares that woke me screaming and the empty space where my history should have been. My training began before I could fully shift. Combat at dawn, tracking by midday, weapons and poisons after dark. Kale was patient but unrelenting, shaping me with the same focused intensity a blacksmith uses to forge a blade, heating, hammering, tempering until all weakness was burned away. I learned to move silently through any terrain, to read tracks invisible to others, to kill efficiently with blade, bow, or bare hands, to suppress every emotion that might compromise a mission: fear, hesitation, mercy. By 16, I made my first kill. A rogue who had attacked our southern borders, slaughtering 2 young guards before I tracked him to his den and put silver through his heart. I still remember how his eyes had widened when he realized the small female he'd dismissed was the last thing he'd ever see. Kale had embraced me that night, pride radiating from him like heat. "You are exactly what I knew you'd become," he whispered. "Perfect." By 20, I was his most trusted hunter, his masterpiece, his secret weapon deployed when others failed. I lived in the barracks with the guards, maintaining distance even from those I trained beside. I ate alone, slept alone, existed in a carefully constructed isolation that kept me sharp. I had no friends, only comrades. No family, only duty. No identity beyond the blade and the mission. It was better that way. Safer. Emotions complicated things, created vulnerabilities, turned warriors into liabilities. I'd watched it happen to others, hunters who formed attachments and then hesitated at critical moments, choosing loyalty to individuals over loyalty to the pack. I would never be that weak. When Kale summoned me to his private chambers 3 weeks ago, I knew immediately this was different. He only called me there for missions that mattered, assignments too sensitive or too dangerous for anyone else. "Joshua Blackthorn," he said, spreading a map across his desk with careful precision. His finger tapped a region deep in the northern mountains, the most dangerous rogue in our territory, perhaps in all territories. I studied the map, memorizing terrain and potential routes. "What did he do?" Kale's jaw tightened, and I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before. Fear. Real, visceral fear that made the hair on my arms rise. He went mad with bloodlust and slaughtered his own pack, women, children, elders, 12 dead before he fled into the mountains 5 years ago. Every hunter I've sent after him has either returned empty-handed or not returned at all. I looked up sharply. Kale had sent hunters who hadn't come back? That detail hadn't been in any reports I'd heard. This rogue was once an alpha, Kale continued, his voice dropping lower, which makes him infinitely more dangerous than the mindless rogues you've faced before. He's intelligent, trained, strategic. He knows how we think because he was once one of us. He turned to face me fully, his expression intense. But you are different, Nissa. You are my masterpiece. You think like a rogue because I trained you from nothing, without the limitations of pack politics or traditional hierarchy. You can get close to him because you move like a ghost. You can kill him because you've never hesitated when it mattered. His hand gripped my shoulder the way it had when I was 7. Bring me his head, and you will finally have earned your place, not as my foundling, but as pack. I accepted without hesitation, bowing my head in acknowledgement of the honor he'd given me. But as I left his chambers and began preparations for the hunt, something unfamiliar flickered in my chest, something that felt almost like doubt. I crushed it immediately and focused on the mission. The trail started cold and grew colder with every mile I traveled north. I tracked Joshua for 3 weeks through territories I had never entered, following signs only a master tracker would notice. Disturbed earth where something heavy had shifted weight, broken branches at specific angles that indicated direction rather than animal passage, the faint musk of wolf lingering in places sheltered from wind and rain. He was smart. Frighteningly so. He doubled back on his own trail, creating loops that would confuse anyone relying solely on scent. He used water to mask his tracks, walking through streams for miles before emerging at unpredictable points. He left false trails that led to dead ends or dangerous terrain where a pursuer might fall or lose precious time. But I was better. Kale had trained me to think like my prey, to anticipate their moves before they made them. Where Joshua expected a tracker to follow scent, I read the landscape itself the way moss grew differently, where someone had disturbed it weeks ago. The subtle patterns in how wildlife avoided certain paths, the almost invisible marks left when claws gripped stone during a climb. I began to understand his rhythm, his patterns, the way he thought. He favored high ground with multiple escape routes. He avoided open areas where he might be spotted from a distance. He moved primarily at dusk and dawn, when shadows made tracking harder. And he was heading steadily deeper into the mountain range, toward terrain so remote and inhospitable that most wolves never ventured there. The higher I climbed, the more isolated I became. No pack links reached this far. The mental connection that bound pack members together, allowing communication and sensing each other's presence, had faded days ago into silence. No backup. No reinforcements if things went wrong. Just me, my weapons, and the mission. The isolation should have bothered me. Most wolves couldn't tolerate being cut off from pack bonds for extended periods. It created a psychological strain, a loneliness that became almost physical. But I had always existed on the edges of pack connection anyway, present but never fully integrated. The silence felt familiar, almost comfortable. At night, I camped in shallow caves and rocky overhangs, building small fires that I extinguished before they could create too much smoke. I reviewed everything I knew about Joshua Blackthorn, reciting the details like a mantra. Exiled 5 years ago after slaughtering his own pack. Suspected of killing 12 members, including women and children. Extremely dangerous and unpredictable. Skilled in combat and strategy. Former alpha, which meant he would be stronger and faster than typical rogues. But something nagged at me. If he was so bloodthirsty, why were there no reports of attacks since his exile? 5 years was a long time for a rogue to go without killing, especially one supposedly driven by violent madness. Rogues without pack bonds typically deteriorated mentally, becoming increasingly unstable and aggressive. Yet Joshua had somehow remained controlled enough to evade Kale's hunters for half a decade while leaving no trail of bodies. It didn't fit the profile. On the 14th day, I encountered other rogues, a small group of 3 living in a makeshift camp near a mountain stream. They were wary when I approached, defensive in the way wolves without pack protection always were. I expected hostility or fear. Instead, when I carefully asked if they had seen or heard of Joshua Blackthorn, their expressions changed. "The Silver Ridge Alpha?" one of them asked, a scarred female with gray threading through her dark hair. "He passed through here about 10 days ago. Didn't cause trouble. Shared his kill with us. and warned us about a rockslide area to the north. I frowned. The rogue Joshua, the one who murdered his pack? The three rogues exchanged glances. The female's expression hardened. Don't know anything about that. We know he was exiled on charges that didn't make sense to a lot of wolves. We know Kale Darkwater took his territory and absorbed it into the Packlands. And we know Joshua has helped more rogues survive out here than he's hurt. She studied me with sharp, knowing eyes. You're one of Kale's hunters, here to finish what he started, I'd guess. I didn't confirm or deny. I simply thanked them for the information and moved on. But their words stayed with me like splinters under skin. Why did they speak his name with respect rather than fear? Why did they call him by his title Alpha, instead of treating him like the monster Kale had described? I pushed the questions away. Doubt was a luxury I couldn't afford. Rogues had their own perspective, their own biases. They would naturally sympathize with another exile rather than trust the word of an Alpha King. It meant nothing. But the splinters dug deeper. On the 21st day, I found his hideout. A cave system deep in the mountains, positioned perfectly for defense. The main entrance was partially hidden by an overhang and thick vegetation, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. The surrounding terrain offered clear sightlines in multiple directions, making it nearly impossible to approach without being seen. And there were at least 2 other exits I could identify, probably more I couldn't, giving him multiple escape routes if needed. It was brilliant, exactly what I would have chosen. I watched for 2 days, hidden in a rocky outcropping 300 yards away, memorizing his patterns with patient precision. He was alone. No pack, no allies, no sign of anyone else entering or leaving the cave. He hunted at dawn when prey was most active, usually returning within 2 hours with enough game to sustain him. He spent midday inside the cave, presumably resting or maintaining his space. In the evenings, he sat outside by a small fire, staring into the flames with an expression I couldn't read from this distance. He looked tired, not physically exhausted, but worn down by something heavier than physical exertion. He sat with a stillness that reminded me of soldiers I'd seen after particularly brutal battles, the ones who survived but carried the weight of what they'd witnessed. It was not the behavior of a mad rogue. I shook off the observation. Appearances meant nothing. Predators often looked harmless before they struck. On the 3rd night, conditions aligned perfectly for the kill. Rain poured in heavy sheets, thunder rolling through the mountains and covering any sound I might make. The storm would mask my scent and make visibility terrible, giving me every advantage. I moved with the confidence of someone who had never failed a mission. I approached from the eastern exit, the one he seemed to use least frequently. My silver dagger was secure in my hand, blessed and sharp enough to kill even an alpha if the strike was true. My heartbeat was calm, steady, controlled. I had done this before. I would do it again. I slipped through the cave entrance silently, water streaming from my hair and weapons. The interior was exactly as I'd calculated, a main chamber with a fire burning low, providing just enough light to see by. Furs piled in one corner for sleeping, weapons mounted on the walls within easy reach, a wooden chest in the corner, closed and locked, and Joshua, standing with his back to me, shoulders tense, head slightly tilted as if listening to something I couldn't hear. "Strike now," my training screamed. "While his back is exposed, while you have advantage, end this." I raised the dagger, moving into position with lethal precision. 3 more steps and I would be close enough for the killing blow. 2 steps, 1, but I hesitated, just for a heartbeat, just for a single moment of uncertainty that I couldn't explain. In that moment, he turned. Our eyes met across the firelit space, his gold and ancient and filled with a recognition that made no sense. Mine wide with shock as something fundamental in the universe shifted and clicked into place with devastating finality. The world exploded. The mate bond struck like lightning, tearing through my chest and wrapping around my heart with brutal, undeniable force. Every nerve ending ignited. My wolf, silent and controlled for years, howled with sudden, overwhelming joy. The dagger trembled in my hand as my entire body responded to his presence with an intensity that shattered every wall I'd built, every control I'd mastered, every certainty I'd held. No, not him. Not the target. Not now. But fate, I would learn, doesn't care about timing, doesn't care about missions or loyalty or the perfect weapon Kale had spent 16 years creating. Fate had other plans entirely. And standing across from me, eyes blazing gold and expression shifting from shock to dark, possessive satisfaction, was the mate I'd been sent to kill. The mate bond hit me like a physical blow, stealing my breath and buckling my knees. It wasn't gentle. Wasn't the romantic, mystical connection the elders described in their stories about fated pairs finding each other at pack gatherings and falling into easy, natural love. This was violent. Overwhelming. A tsunami of sensation and emotion that crashed through every defense I'd built, drowning me in feelings I didn't have names for. Every nerve ending screamed with awareness of him, the precise distance between us, the rhythm of his breathing, the heat radiating from his skin, the scent of pine and rain, and something fundamentally male that made my mouth water and my wolf whine with desperate need. My wolf, usually quiet and obedient, buried so deep I sometimes forgot she existed, howled with recognition and joy. She surged forward with a force that nearly shifted me involuntarily, clawing toward the surface, trying to reach the male who was hers, ours, meant for us. No, I thought desperately, fighting to maintain control even as my vision blurred and my legs threatened to give out completely. Not him, not the target, not now. This couldn't be happening. The moon goddess couldn't be this cruel, couldn't design a fate this twisted. I was here to kill him. I had trained for weeks, tracked for miles, prepared for this exact moment. The mission was everything. The mission was all I had. But fate doesn't care about timing or loyalty or missions. Fate doesn't care about anything except the bond. Joshua's eyes widened with the same shock I felt, gold bleeding into the edges as his wolf surfaced in response to mine. I watched the recognition hit him, saw the exact moment he understood what had just happened between us. For 3 heartbeats we stood frozen, separated by 10 feet of cave floor that suddenly felt like an impossible distance and far too close all at once. The blade trembled in my hand. My training screamed at me to move, to strike while he was distracted, to complete the mission before this catastrophic complication could take root. But my body wouldn't obey. The bond wrapped tighter with every second, sinking hooks into my chest and pulling, demanding I close the distance, demanding I submit to something older and more powerful than duty. Then his shock transformed into something else entirely. Hunger. Raw and undisguised, burning in his eyes as he looked at me like I was something precious and dangerous all at once. Possession. His wolf rising to meet mine, claiming me before I could even process what was happening. And underneath it all, a dark satisfaction that sent heat pooling low in my belly and made my knees weaken further. He moved with predatory grace, faster than I could react despite all my training, despite the fact that I was supposed to be Kale's perfect weapon. I tried to step back, but my body betrayed me, frozen by the bond's pull. His hand closed around my throat before I could raise the dagger defensively. Not choking, not threatening, but claiming with devastating certainty. His fingers wrapped around my neck with possessive confidence, his thumb finding the pulse point that raced wildly beneath my skin and stroking it with deliberate, maddening pressure. The touch ignited something primal in me. My wolf practically purred, submitting instantly to the dominance in his grip. My human mind recoiled even as my body leaned into his touch, craving more, needing more. He pulled me forward with that single hand, inexorable and controlled, until our bodies nearly touched, until I could feel the heat radiating from him like standing too close to a forge, until his breath ghosted across my lips, and I could taste rain and want and something darkly masculine that made my head spin. "They sent you to kill me," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion barely contained. The sound vibrated through me where his hand pressed against my throat, resonating in places I didn't know existed. "And now you are my mate." The words hung between us, undeniable truth wrapped in devastating irony. I tried to speak, to deny, to resist what my entire being was screaming at me to accept. But the bond roared between us, louder than thought, stronger than will, demanding completion, demanding surrender, demanding I acknowledge what we both felt. My wolf begged me to drop the weapon, to wrap my arms around this male instead, to accept the gift fate had given us, to submit to the alpha who was ours, finally ours. "No," I gasped, fighting against the pull with everything I had left. My free hand came up, pressing against his chest to create distance, but the moment I touched him, skin sent electricity racing up my arm, and I nearly moaned from the intensity. "This is a trick. I am not a rogue," he interrupted, his grip tightening possessively, pulling me that last inch closer, until our bodies pressed together fully, and I felt every hard plane of muscle, every controlled breath, every barely leashed response to the bond. "I am an alpha." His eyes held mine, gold and ancient and filled with truths I didn't want to hear. "My name is Joshua Blackthorn, former alpha of the Silver Ridge Pack, and the man who trained you to kill me, the man you call your savior, is Kale Darkwater, the murderer who slaughtered my family, exiled me on false charges, and stole everything I loved." His words were stones shattering glass, each one breaking something I'd believed was unbreakable. "You're lying," I whispered, but even I could hear the uncertainty in my voice. "Kale saved me. He took me in when rogues killed my family. He gave me purpose, He gave you lies," Joshua said, his voice dropping lower, more dangerous. "He gave you a fictional past to replace the real one he stole. He gave you training to turn you into the weapon that would finally destroy me. And he sent you here believing you were hunting a monster, never telling you that the monster was him. I wanted to call him a liar, wanted to drive the dagger. I still held into his chest and end this nightmare. But the bond pulsed between us with truth, with recognition, with a certainty that bypassed logic and reason entirely. My wolf knew he wasn't lying. She could feel it through the bondmates couldn't lie to each other. Not completely. Not when the connection ran this deep. My body knew, responding to him in ways that went beyond physical attraction, recognizing something fundamental and right about his presence, his touch, his claim. Only my mind, wrapped in 16 years of Kale's careful programming, still resisted. "Why should I believe you?" I demanded, even as my body betrayed me by pressing closer to his. "You could be manipulating the bond, using it to..." "To what?" he challenged. "To save my own life? If I wanted to do that, I would have killed you the dozen times I had the chance over the past 3 weeks. I knew you were tracking me, Nissa. I let you find me." The use of my name on his lips sent shivers down my spine. "I knew the moment I caught your scent who you were, what you'd been sent to do. And I let you come anyway because I had to know if fate was truly this twisted, if the moon goddess would really bind me to the one person Kale spent years molding into my destruction." His thumb stroked my racing pulse again, a gesture that was both calming and intensely possessive. "But now I know the truth. You're not just a weapon he built. You're my mate, and everything Kale told you, everything he made you believe about who you are and who I am, is a lie designed to make you complete his revenge." "I don't believe you," I said, but the words came out weak, unconvincing even to my own ears. "Then believe this," he said, leaning closer until his lips nearly brushed mine, and the bond screamed for me to close the distance. "The bond doesn't lie. Your wolf knows exactly who I am. She knows you belong with me, not with Kale's pack. She knows that everything you've been told is wrong." He was right. My wolf did know. She was howling it, screaming it, begging me to listen, but accepting that meant accepting that my entire life was a lie, that Kale had manipulated and used me, that I had no real identity beyond what he'd built, that everything I'd believed, everything I'd trained for, everything I'd killed for, was in service of someone else's vendetta. The dagger slipped from my trembling fingers and clattered to the stone floor. "Prove it," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Prove you're telling the truth." Joshua's expression softened slightly, though the possessive hunger never left his eyes. "I'll prove everything," he promised. "But first, you need to stop trying to run. The bond won't let you leave, not until it's acknowledged. We're stuck with each other until you accept what we both feel." As if to emphasize his point, the bond tightened painfully, a reminder that denying it came with consequences. I was trapped by fate, by the bond, by the impossible situation crashing down around me, and trapped in the arms of the man I'd been sent to kill. He released my throat but didn't step back, his presence overwhelming every sense. Without his hand anchoring me, I stumbled backward, desperate to create distance, desperate to breathe without inhaling his scent, desperate to think without the bond clouding every rational thought. But the moment I put space between us, the bond stretched taut like a cord, pulling tight, creating a physical ache in my chest that intensified with each step. "Stay away from me," I commanded, retrieving the fallen dagger with trembling hands and raising it defensively. The weapon felt wrong now, foreign in my grip when pointed at him. My wolf snarled in protest, furious that I would threaten our mate. "Or what?" he asked, his voice rough with challenge and something darker. He tilted his head, studying me with those unsettling gold eyes that saw too much. "You'll kill your mate? Complete the mission and sever the bond before it fully forms?" "We both know you can't do it, Nissa." The way he said my name sent shivers cascading down my spine, intimate and possessive, like he had the right to speak it that way. Like I belonged to him simply because fate decreed it. "You don't know anything about what I can do," I shot back, but my voice lacked conviction. The blade wavered in my grip. "Don't I?" He took a single step forward and I tensed, ready to strike or flee, though both options felt equally impossible. "I've been watching you track me for 3 weeks. Watching you move through the forest like a ghost. Watching you solve every false trail I left. Watching you get closer with that single-minded determination that would be admirable if it wasn't aimed at killing me." Another step. The bond hummed with approval at the decreased distance. "I could have killed you a dozen times, Nissa. That night you camped near the stream and fell asleep before your fire was fully extinguished. That morning you were so focused on the tracks you didn't notice me watching from the ridge above. That afternoon you bathed in the waterfall and left your weapons on the shore. Heat flooded my face. He'd been that close? I hadn't detected him even once? I knew who you were the moment I caught your scent," he continued, his expression softening into something that might have been grief. "I knew what he'd done, what he'd turned you into, and I knew that when you finally found me, I would have to choose between my own survival and the truth you deserved to hear." "You're lying," I insisted, but the words felt hollow. "Kale saved me. He took me in when rogues killed my family. He gave me purpose when I had nothing." Joshua's expression darkened, something dangerous flashing in his eyes. "He gave you lies," he said, his voice dropping to a growl that resonated through the bond and made my wolf whimper. "Carefully constructed lies to replace the truth he couldn't afford for you to remember. You want the truth? I'll show you." He moved to the wooden chest in the corner, keeping his movements slow and deliberate like approaching a spooked animal that might bolt. I tracked him with the dagger, though we both knew I wouldn't throw it. Couldn't throw it. Not with the bond screaming in protest at the mere thought. From the chest he pulled a folder, worn and stained with age and weather, the edges frayed from years of handling. He tossed it at my feet, the contents spilling across the stone floor. "Read it," he commanded, his alpha authority bleeding into the words and making my wolf want to obey instantly. "Then decide if I'm the monster Kale painted me to be." My hands shook as I crouched to pick up the scattered documents, keeping the dagger within reach and one eye on Joshua. But he had moved back to the fire, giving me space even though I could feel the effort it cost him through the bond, the way it pulled and ached when we weren't close. The first document was official pack records, exile orders signed by Kale, dated 5 years ago. The charges were damning: betrayal of pack trust, consorting with rogues, plotting to overthrow the pack council, and crimes against pack members. Joshua Blackthorne, Alpha of Silver Ridge, declared rogue and exiled permanently, with authorization to kill on sight. I had seen documents like this before. This was standard procedure for dangerous rogues. But there were other papers underneath, witness statements describing Joshua's alleged crimes, signed and dated. And then, on different paper with different dates, recantations of those same statements. Wolves admitting they had been coerced, threatened, forced to testify falsely. Each recantation was stamped in red ink. Suppressed by order of Alpha King Kale. My hands tightened on the papers, crinkling them. Photographs spilled out next. The first showed Joshua's pack before the massacre, dozens of smiling wolves gathered for what looked like a celebration. Children playing. Mates with arms around each other. Elders sitting in positions of honor. It looked like every pack gathering I'd ever seen. Happy, whole, alive. Then the after photos. Bodies burned beyond recognition. Buildings reduced to ash and rubble. Children goddess. There were children's small forms that would never grow up, never shift, never find their mates. The massacre had been thorough and brutal, designed to leave no survivors. I felt bile rise in my throat. My vision blurred at the edges. "This proves nothing," I whispered, but my voice cracked. "Kale could have been investigating. These could have been taken after you, after I killed them. Joshua interrupted, his voice harsh with barely controlled emotion. He crossed the space between us in 2 strides, dropping to his knees in front of me so we were eye level. Look at the dates, Nissa. Look at when the massacre happened and when I was supposedly there. I looked. The massacre was dated on a full moon in late spring, 5 years ago, but tucked between the photos was a travel document, Joshua's signature, on a peace treaty negotiation with the Clearwater Pack, 3 territories away, dated the same day, witnessed by their Alpha and Council, stamped with official seals. I was 300 miles away negotiating a water rights agreement when it happened, Joshua said quietly. I had been gone for 4 days. I was supposed to be gone for 6. But I came back early because something felt wrong. The bond I had with my pack, the alpha connection that lets us feel our members, had gone silent. His jaw clenched, pain evident in every line of his face. By the time I returned, everyone I loved was dead, and Kale's forces were already occupying the territory. He was waiting for me. He had wolves positioned to take me into custody the moment I arrived. He showed me the bodies of my pack, and told me I had done it, that I had gone mad with power and slaughtered them before fleeing. He could have been trying to help you, I argued weakly. To contain the situation before what? Before I could defend myself? Before I could show evidence of where I'd actually been? Joshua leaned closer, his scent wrapping around me. He wanted my territory, Nissa. Silver Ridge sits on the largest freshwater source in the region and controls 3 major trade routes. With my pack gone and me declared rogue, he absorbed it all, expanded his power, eliminated a rival. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and turned to another page in the folder. And then he found a little girl wandering near the massacre site. The paper showed a report written in Kale's own hand. I recognized his precise, careful script from years of reading mission briefings. Found 1 survivor, female child, approximately 6 to 7 years old, in shock and covered in blood. No identification, no memory of events. Assessment: potential asset if properly trained. Will claim as foundling and raise under pack protection. Child's memories have been suppressed through intervention of pack healer Morrison. Fresh start recommended. The room spun. My hands were numb. The words blurred together and separated, and blurred again. A girl from my pack, Joshua continued, his voice rough with emotion. A child he should have returned to her surviving family members. Instead, he took her, wiped her memories with forced magical intervention, and gave her a new history. A false past designed to make her loyal to him and him alone. No, I breathed, shaking my head. That's not. I would remember something. Some fragment of, "You were 6 years old and traumatized," he said, catching my chin gently when I tried to look away. And then Kale had his healer rip through your mind and bury everything that made you who you were. Of course you don't remember. That was the point. He leaned down, his face inches from mine, his eyes blazing with intensity. You're the one he sent to finish what he started. You're my revenge made flesh, Nissa. The daughter of my beta, raised as a weapon and aimed at my heart. Except fate had other plans. His thumb brushed across my cheekbone, wiping away tears I hadn't realized were falling. The mate bond doesn't lie. You can feel it, can't you? The truth resonating through the connection. I'm not lying to you. I'm not manipulating you. I'm the man your alpha raised you to kill, and you're the child he stole from my pack to do it. The folder slipped from my nerveless fingers. Everything I knew, everything I believed, everything I was, it was all built on lies. And the man kneeling before me, the one I'd been sent to murder, might be the only person who had ever told me the truth. I should have run. Every survival instinct I'd honed over 16 years of training screamed at me to escape. To get out of this cave and away from the man who had just dismantled my entire existence with documents and photographs and truths I didn't want to believe. To return to Kale, to report this encounter, to let him sort truth from lies and tell me what to think, what to believe, what to do. I pushed to my feet, swaying slightly, and moved toward the cave entrance with mechanical determination. The rain had lessened to a steady drizzle, and beyond the opening, I could see the dark expanse of forest that would lead me back to pack territory, back to the only life I'd ever known. I made it 3 steps toward the entrance before the pain hit. The mate bond stretched too far, too fast, rebelled. It felt like something vital was being ripped from my chest, like my heart was tearing in half, like every nerve ending was being scraped raw. A scream caught in my throat as my legs buckled and I went down hard on my knees, gasping for air that wouldn't come. Strong arms caught me before I hit the ground completely, pulling me back against a solid chest. The moment Joshua touched me, electricity raced through every nerve, chasing away the agony and replacing it with a different kind of intensity, one that was almost as overwhelming but infinitely preferable. "The bond won't let you leave," he said quietly against my ear, his voice rough with his own struggle. "Not until it's acknowledged. We're stuck with each other until you accept the truth." "I'm not accepting anything," I gasped through the residual pain, but I stopped fighting his hold. The agony receded the moment I stopped trying to leave, fading to a dull ache that pulsed in time with my racing heartbeat. He carried me to the fur-covered bedding near the fire, lowering me carefully like I was something precious rather than the weapon sent to end him. Every point where his hands touched, my body burned with awareness. When he finally released me, the loss felt like abandonment despite everything. He sat across from me, giving me space but close enough that the bond hummed with contentment, satisfied that we were together, even if we weren't touching. The firelight cast shadows across his face, highlighting the sharp angles of his jaw, the intensity of his eyes, the barely controlled tension in his shoulders. "We don't have much time," he said, his voice low and controlled. "Kale will expect you to return or report within 48 hours. When you don't, he'll send others. Hunters who won't hesitate, wolves who weren't raised in his household and won't trigger the bond. If we're going to survive this, you need to decide what you believe." I forced myself to think through the haze of bond-induced need that made it hard to focus on anything except the mail sitting too far away. The documents could be forged, photographs could be manipulated, even official records could be falsified with enough power and motivation. But the pain when I tried to leave was real. The mate bond was real. I could feel it even now, pulling gently but persistently, wanting me to close the distance, wanting me to accept what my wolf already knew with absolute certainty. And something else nagged at me, a question I couldn't dismiss. Why would Kale need to wipe a child's memories unless those memories contained something dangerous, something that would undermine the story he wanted to tell? What was I before? I asked quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. Who was I? Joshua's expression softened, grief and something tender crossing his features. He leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on his knees, making himself less threatening even though we both knew he could cross the distance between us in a heartbeat. "Your name was Nissa Thornwood. You were 6 years old, daughter of my beta Marcus and his mate Elena. Marcus was my best friend, my brother in everything but blood. Elena was pack healer, and the gentlest soul I've ever known." He paused, lost in memory, pain evident in every line of his face. "You had a brother, Finn, who was 10. He was training to be a warrior, showed real promise, strong and fast but also kind. He looked after the younger pack children, like they were his personal responsibility." His voice roughened with emotion. "He died in the massacre protecting those younger children. Witnesses who survived the initial attack said he held off Kale's wolves long enough for a dozen pups to escape into the forest. You survived because he told you to run, and you listened. You were found 3 miles from Packlands, covered in blood that wasn't yours, in shock and unresponsive." I closed my eyes, searching desperately for any trace of memory, a face, a voice, a feeling, anything that would confirm or deny what he was saying. But there was only emptiness, a blank space where my childhood should have been, and the manufactured story Kale had given me to fill it. "I don't remember them," I whispered, tears burning behind my closed eyelids. "I don't remember any of it. Not my parents, not my brother, not your pack. There's just nothing." "Because Kale didn't just take you," Joshua said, his voice heavy with anger barely held in check. "He erased you. He had his healer rip through a traumatized child's mind and bury everything that made you who you were. He stole your past, your family, your identity, and replaced it all with lies designed to make you loyal only to him. He shifted closer, closing some of the distance between us." The bond sang with approval. "But the bond doesn't lie, Nissa. Your wolf knows who I am. She recognized me the moment our eyes met. She knows you belong to the Silver Ridge bloodline. She knows you're mine." The possessive word sent heat flooding through me despite my resistance, despite my confusion, despite everything. My wolf preened at the claim, wanting to hear it again, wanting to accept it fully. "Stop saying that," I demanded, but my voice lacked conviction. Why? He challenged, leaning closer still. His scent wrapped around me like a drug, pine and rain, and something fundamentally male that made my body respond in ways my training had never prepared me for. Because it's true? Because it destroys everything you thought you knew? Because accepting it means admitting that the man you've called alpha, the man you've devoted your life to serving, is the real monster? He was close enough now that I could feel his body heat, could see the gold flecks in his eyes, could count each individual breath he took. You feel it just like I do, he continued, his voice dropping to something darker, more intimate. The pull, the need, the certainty that goes beyond logic or reason. You want to fight it because it dismantles everything Kale built in your mind, but denying the bond will destroy us both. He was right. I could feel it, the truth, resonating through the connection, the way my wolf howled for him, the way my body responded to his proximity with an intensity that terrified me. This wasn't just attraction, it was recognition, completion, coming home to something I didn't know I'd been missing. I don't know what's real anymore, I admitted, my voice breaking. I don't know who I am or what I'm supposed to do or... The bond surged between us, demanding, insistent, drowning out doubt with pure need. I moved without conscious decision, closing the remaining distance between us and pressing my lips to his in a kiss that was as much desperation as desire. I needed to feel something certain, something real, something beyond the chaos of questions and revelations that were tearing me apart. Joshua responded instantly, his hand coming up to cup the back of my head, his other arm wrapping around my waist and pulling me flush against him. The kiss deepened, became consuming, electric energy racing through every nerve ending until I couldn't tell where I ended, and he began. His touch lingered on my thighs as he shifted me closer, and I gasped against his mouth at the intensity of sensation. The bond roared its approval, flooding me with endorphins and need and a rightness that obliterated every doubt, every question, every carefully constructed wall. This was real. This was true. Whatever else was lies, the bond was absolute. He kissed me like he was claiming me, marking me, making me his with every stroke of his tongue and every possessive grip of his hands. I kissed him back with equal desperation, channeling all my confusion and fear and need into the connection between us. When he finally pulled back, both of us breathing hard, his eyes were molten gold and his control was visibly fraying. "Nissa," he said, his voice strained. "If we don't stop now, I won't be able to." "Then don't stop," I heard myself whisper, surprising us both. His grip tightened on me, possessive and trembling with restraint. "Not like this," he said roughly. "Not when you're confused and hurt and desperate for anything that feels certain. When we complete this bond, and we will, it needs to be your choice, clear and conscious and without doubt." He pressed his forehead to mine, his breath mingling with mine. "I've waited 5 years for you. I can wait until you're ready to choose me freely." The words broke something in me and healed something simultaneously. He was right. I wasn't ready. But for the first time since the bond snapped into place, I could imagine being ready, and that terrified me almost as much as it thrilled me. 3 days trapped in the cave with Joshua unraveled me piece by piece. He didn't touch me beyond what was necessary, passing me food, steadying me when dizziness from the bond made me stumble, helping me navigate the narrow passages to the secondary cave entrance where fresh water pooled. But proximity was its own torture in ways I hadn't anticipated. Every breath carried his scent, infiltrating my lungs and settling into my bloodstream until I couldn't remember what it felt like to breathe air that wasn't saturated with pine and rain and him. Every accidental brush of skin, his hand against mine when passing a cup, his shoulder bumping mine as we sat by the fire, his fingers steadying my elbow on uneven ground, sent fire racing through my veins and made my wolf whine with desperate need. The mate bond grew stronger with each passing hour, no longer just a pull but a living thing between us, demanding completion, demanding surrender, demanding I stop fighting what my entire being recognized as inevitable. He filled the hours with stories, his voice low and steady as he painted pictures of a life I couldn't remember but somehow recognized in the hollow spaces of my chest. He told me about his pack, Silver Ridge, named for the mineral deposits that ran through the mountain range and caught moonlight like frozen waterfalls. About the children who played in the streams, the hunters who brought back game to share communally, the elders who settled disputes with wisdom earned through generations. He told me about my parents. Marcus, his beta, who had a laugh that could be heard across packlands and a tactical mind that made him invaluable in negotiations. Elena, the healer, who could soothe any hurt with gentle hands and gentler words, who sang while she worked and made the injured feel safe even in pain. He told me about the child I had been, curious and fearless, always trailing after my older brother Finn, always asking questions the adults didn't know how to answer, always humming to myself when I concentrated on tasks. "You wanted to be a healer like your mother," Joshua said on the second day, firelight playing across his features. "But you also wanted to be a warrior like your father. You told me once that you didn't see why you couldn't be both. You were 6 years old and already questioning traditions that had stood for generations." Something ached in my chest at the image, a little girl who had agency and dreams, and a family who loved her. A little girl who had been stolen and erased and rebuilt into something else entirely. He showed me more evidence beyond the initial folder. Letters exchanged between pack alphas discussing concerns about Kale's aggressive expansion. Photographs of pack gatherings where my parents smiled at the camera with me, perched on my father's shoulders. Territorial maps marking how Kale's lands had absorbed Silver Ridge territory within months of the massacre, expanding his power significantly. He even had testimony-recorded statements from wolves who had witnessed Kale's private meetings where he discussed eliminating the blackthorn problem and consolidating control over the water rights and trade routes that Silver Ridge commanded. The evidence was overwhelming, damning, irrefutable. But it was the small things that convinced me most, things he couldn't have fabricated, things that went beyond documents and photographs. He knew I was left-handed before I ever demonstrated it, adjusting how he passed me weapons and tools accordingly. He knew I had a birthmark shaped like a crescent moon on my left shoulder blade, something only pack members would have seen when I was a child bathing in communal waters or shifting among others. He knew I hummed when I was nervous, an unconscious habit I'd never thought about until he mentioned gently that my mother had done the same thing. "She hummed old pack songs," he said softly. "Melodies passed down through generations. You hum the same ones, even though you don't remember learning them. Memory lives in more than just the mind, Nissa." The wall of denial cracked wider with each revelation, letting in truths I wasn't ready to accept but could no longer refute. On the fourth night, I woke from a nightmare, gasping and disoriented. The dreams had been getting worse, fragmented images of fire and screaming, of small hands covered in blood, of a voice yelling, "Run, Nissa, run!" while the world burned behind me. I jerked awake with a cry lodged in my throat, tangled in furs, my heart racing so fast I thought it might explode. Strong arms pulled me against a solid chest before I fully registered moving. Joshua had crossed the cave in the darkness, responding to my distress through the bond before conscious thought caught up. His voice rumbled in his chest as he murmured soothing words I couldn't quite parse, his hand stroking my hair with steady, calming rhythm. The bond sang with contentment, with rightness, with home. I should have pulled away. Should have maintained the distance we'd carefully preserved over the past 3 days. But I was so tired of fighting the bond, fighting the truth, fighting the part of myself that wanted to surrender to this male who held me like I was precious. Just for a moment, I let myself lean into him, let myself accept the comfort he offered, let myself feel safe in a way I hadn't since, maybe ever. It was a mistake. The second I surrendered, even partially, the bond surged stronger, amplifying everything. His scent became intoxicating. His touch became addictive. The steady beat of his heart beneath my ear became the only rhythm that mattered. Joshua's hand stilled in my hair, his breathing changing from calm to controlled, like he was using every ounce of discipline to maintain composure. The arm around my waist tightened imperceptibly, possessive and protective simultaneously. When I tilted my head back to look at him, his eyes were molten gold in the darkness, his wolf barely contained beneath the surface. I could feel the tension in his body, the way every muscle was locked tight with restraint, the way his control hung by a thread. "Nissa," he warned, his voice strained and rough. "If you don't pull away now, I won't be able to stop." I should have moved, should have retreated to my side of the cave and rebuilt the walls between us. Should have remembered that I still didn't fully trust him, still wasn't sure what I believed, still wasn't ready to make this choice. Instead, I heard myself whisper, "Then don't." He kissed me like a starving man finally allowed to feast, consuming and claiming and utterly overwhelming. There was nothing gentle about it, nothing uncertain, just raw need and desperate hunger, and the bond roaring between us with triumphant satisfaction. I kissed him back with equal desperation, years of suppressed needs and denied desires pouring out in a rush I couldn't control. His hands mapped my body with possessive certainty, learning every curve and hollow, claiming territory with every touch. My hands explored the hard planes of muscle beneath his shirt, feeling the power coiled in every line of his body, the strength barely leashed. The bond roared its approval, urging us toward completion, demanding we seal what fate had already decided. Heat pooled low in my belly as he shifted, pressing me back into the furs, his body covering mine with delicious weight. His mouth moved from my lips to my throat, finding the pulse point that raced wildly, marking me with kisses and gentle bites that made me gasp. My hands fisted in his hair, holding him close, encouraging him, wordlessly begging for more. But just as his hand slid beneath my shirt, fingers tracing patterns on bare skin that made me arch into his touch, he pulled back, breathing hard. "Not like this," he said roughly, his voice barely human. "Not until you choose it freely, not because the bond is driving you insane." "I choose this," I insisted, reaching for him again, desperate to reclaim the connection. "I choose you." "Do you?" He caught my wrists gently but firmly, holding me still when I would have pulled him back down. "Or are you just trying to escape the confusion, using desire to avoid making the decision you're not ready for?" "What decision?" I demanded, frustration and need, making my voice sharp. "The bond already made it for us." "No." He pressed his forehead to mine, his breath mingling with mine in the small space between us. "The bond made us compatible, made us mates. But completing it, choosing to accept it fully, permanently, that's still your decision to make." His thumbs stroked over my racing pulse, points at my wrists. "When we complete this bond, Nissa, it will be because you accept all of it. The truth about Kale, the truth about who you were and who you are, the truth about me and what choosing me means. Not because you're overwhelmed by physical need, not because you're trying to forget or escape or avoid." He released one wrist to cut my face, his touch impossibly gentle despite the tension thrumming through his body. "I want you. Goddess knows I've never wanted anything more, but I want you clear-eyed and certain, not lost in bond madness and confusion. You deserve that. We deserve that." I wanted to argue, wanted to insist that I was certain, that I knew what I wanted, that he should stop being noble and just give us both what we desperately needed. But he was right. I was using desire to avoid decision, using the overwhelming physicality of the bond to escape the harder questions I still hadn't answered. Did I believe him about Kale? Did I accept that everything I knew about myself was a lie? Was I ready to turn my back on the only life I'd ever known? The answers still terrified me. "I hate that you're right," I whispered. He laughed, the sound rough but genuine. "I hate it too, but someday soon you'll be glad I waited." He rolled off me, putting necessary distance between us even though the bond protested sharply. We lay side by side in the darkness, not touching, both breathing hard, both wanting what we couldn't yet have. And somewhere in that space between desire and decision, I began to understand what it meant to truly choose rather than simply obey. On the 5th day, Kale's hunters arrived. I heard them before Joshua did, my ears catching the subtle sounds that didn't belong, the deliberate silence of controlled breathing, the careful placement of feet trained to move quietly, the faint rustle of weapons being readied. I recognized their formation patterns from my own training, could identify their approach strategy from the way they were spacing themselves around the cave's perimeter. 4 wolves, heavily armed, moving with lethal purpose toward the cave. My body tensed automatically, years of conditioning preparing me for combat. But this time, I wasn't sure which side I was supposed to be on. Joshua read my expression instantly, the bond, allowing him to sense the conflict warring inside me. He stood slowly, his eyes never leaving mine, his posture calm despite the approaching threat. "This is it," he said quietly, his voice steady but his eyes intense with emotion. "You choose now, Nissa. Go with them, return to Kale, and live the lie, or stay with me and fight for the truth." The old Nissa, the weapon Kale had forged, would have gone without hesitation, would have seen this as rescue, as salvation from the rogue who had supposedly corrupted her mind, would have fulfilled her duty and returned to the only master she'd ever known. But that woman had been built on lies, constructed from stolen memories and manufactured loyalty. The person I was becoming, the person I had always been beneath the programming, made a different choice. I turned to Joshua, my movements deliberate and certain. I took his face in my hands, feeling the rough stubble beneath my palms, seeing the hope and fear warring in his golden eyes, and kissed him with absolute certainty. "I choose you," I said against his lips, loud enough that the approaching hunters could hear through the cave entrance. "I choose us. I choose the truth, whatever it costs me." The bond completed in a rush of power that dropped us both to our knees. Gold light flooded the cave, visible even in the pre-dawn darkness, as the mate bond locked into place permanently. It wasn't gentle, it was transformation. Two souls recognizing and merging, two wolves accepting what fate had decreed. The sensation was overwhelming, drowning me in emotion and power and connection that went deeper than blood or bone. His wolf and mine merged in recognition, and suddenly I could feel him not just physically but emotionally, spiritually, completely. His emotions became mine, the fierce protectiveness, the overwhelming relief, the love that had been building since the moment the bond first snapped into place. His certainty became my anchor. His devotion became my strength, and more memories that weren't mine flooded in, shared through the completed bond. I saw the massacre through his eyes, saw him returning to Packlands expecting welcome and finding only ash and death. Saw Kale standing over my father's body, silver blade still dripping, wearing an expression of cold satisfaction. Saw Kale's wolves dragging a screaming 6-year-old girl away me, I realized with horror. While Kale smiled and gave orders to have the child prepared for her new life, the truth crashed through me with devastating clarity. Everything Joshua had told me was real. Every document, every photograph, every painful revelation, all of it true. The hunters burst into the cave just as we rose together, no longer separate but unified, the bond humming between us with completed certainty. The leader was Marcus, not my father Marcus, but another Marcus, one of Kale's most loyal guards, someone who had trained beside me for years. His face registered shock when he saw us standing together, saw the gold light of the completed bond still fading around us, saw my hand clasped firmly in Joshua's. "Nissa," he called, his voice sharp with command and concern. "Step away from the rogue. He's corrupted your mind. You need to come home." I looked at the wolves I had once called comrades, saw them through new eyes enhanced by the bond and the returned memories still processing through my consciousness. They weren't family. They weren't even friends. They were Kale's tools, just as I had been weapons pointed at whatever target he chose, questioning nothing, obeying everything. "Marcus," I said calmly, my voice steadier than I'd expected. "Did you know my real name was Thornwood before Kale changed it? Did you know my father was Beta of Silver Ridge? Did any of you ever ask why Kale needed a child soldier trained specifically to kill one exiled alpha?" They faltered, uncertainty crossing their faces. Behind Marcus, the other three exchanged glances, doubt creeping into expressions that had been certain moments before. "Kale lied to all of us," I continued, squeezing Joshua's hand. "Joshua isn't the monster. Kale is. He massacred an entire pack to steal their territory. He took me from the bodies of my family and erased my memories so he could turn me into the weapon that would finish his revenge. And I'm done being his tool." "You don't know what you're saying," Marcus insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. "The bond has confused you, made you forget your loyalty, your duty." "My duty was never to Kale," I interrupted. "It was stolen from me and redirected. But I remember now. I remember everything." What happened next was brutal and swift. Two of the hunters, younger wolves who had been raised on Kale's propaganda and couldn't process the cognitive dissonance, attacked without warning. They moved with lethal precision, weapons drawn, aiming to incapacitate Joshua and capture me. But they hadn't trained with a bonded pair. Joshua and I fought together, the completed bond allowing us to move as one, anticipating each other's actions perfectly, without need for communication. When he struck left, I covered right. When I dropped low, he went high. We flowed around each other like water, like we'd been fighting together for years instead of minutes. When it was over, 2 hunters lay dead. One was unconscious and bleeding, and Marcus was on his knees with Joshua's blade at his throat and my dagger pressed against his spine. "Tell Kale," I said coldly, my voice carrying the authority of someone who had finally claimed her own power, "that Nissa Thornwood remembers everything now. Tell him his weapon has turned against him. Tell him I'm coming for the truth, and I'm bringing my mate. Joshua's blade pressed slightly harder. Tell him the Silver Ridge Alpha is alive and ready to face him. Tell him his crimes will be exposed before the Pack Council. Tell him his time is over. We released Marcus simultaneously, stepping back in perfect synchronization. He scrambled to his feet, eyes wide with fear and confusion, grabbed his unconscious companion, and fled into the pre-dawn forest. The moment they were gone, Joshua pulled me close, pressing his forehead to mine in the gesture that had become our anchor. "You understand what you've done?" he asked quietly. "You can't go back. Kale won't forgive this. He'll send everything he has to destroy us both." "I don't want to go back," I told him fiercely, my hands fisting in his shirt. "I want justice. For your pack. For my family. For my brother who died protecting children. For every wolf Kale has manipulated and destroyed. For the little girl who had her entire identity stolen." His eyes blazed with pride and love and fierce determination. "Then we do this together," he promised. "As mates. As equals. As Alpha and his chosen partner. We gather allies. We expose his crimes. We take back what he stole." I kissed him again, sealing the promise with the bond that now connected us permanently. Together, we walked out of the cave into the dawn, no longer hunter and hunted but partners united in purpose. Behind us lay the lies and the life I had been forced into, the weapon I had been shaped to become, the false identity that had never truly fit. Ahead lay danger, truth, and the fight to reclaim everything Kale had stolen not just from me, but from everyone he'd manipulated and destroyed in his quest for power. But for the first time in my life, I was choosing my own path, and I was choosing it with my mate beside me. Together, we were stronger than any weapon Kale could forge. Together, we were unstoppable. The truth lay crystal clear now, illuminated by the rising sun and the golden bond that connected us, and we would use that truth to burn down everything Kale had built on lies. My story isn't just about discovering the truth or finding my mate. It's about understanding the lessons that came from being broken and rebuilt, from having everything stolen and choosing to reclaim it on my own terms. The first lesson: question everything, especially the narratives that benefit those in power. I spent 16 years accepting Kale's version of my history because I had nothing to compare it to, no memory to contradict his carefully constructed lies. But there were always cracks, inconsistencies I dismissed, questions I suppressed, doubts I buried. Trust your instincts when something doesn't align, even if you can't articulate why. The second lesson: identity isn't given, it's claimed. Kale tried to erase who I was and replace it with who he needed me to be. But beneath the programming, beneath the manufactured memories, some essential part of me remained. The bond awakened it, but it had always been there, waiting. You are more than what others tell you. You are more than your trauma. You are more than the weapon someone tried to make you. The third lesson: true strength comes from choosing, not obeying. I was powerful as Kale's weapon, skilled, lethal, effective, but I wasn't strong. Strength requires agency, requires standing in the face of uncertainty and choosing your path even when it's terrifying. The moment I chose Joshua, chose truth, chose myself, I became stronger than any training could make me. The fourth lesson: healing requires confronting what was stolen. I could have completed the bond and run, started fresh somewhere far from Kale's reach. But running would have left the wound open, left him free to hurt others, left my family's deaths unavenged and their memories buried. Real healing demands we face what was taken and fight to reclaim it or honor it properly. The final lesson: you are not alone in your fight. I spent years isolated, believing connection was weakness, that I had to be self-sufficient to survive. But the bond taught me that partnership multiplies strength rather than dividing it. Joshua and I together were greater than the sum of our parts. Find your people, build your pack, fight together. My journey from weapon to woman, from tool to partner, from erased to reclaimed, taught me that fate doesn't define us, our choices do. The bond gave me Joshua, but I had to choose to accept him. The truth was revealed, but I had to choose to believe it. The path forward was shown, but I had to choose to walk it. And every day, I choose again. Choose truth over comfort. Choose justice over revenge. Choose growth over stagnation. Choose partnership over isolation. That's the real transformation. Not becoming someone new, but becoming who you always were beneath what others tried to make you. Thank you for walking this journey with me from the moment my blade trembled at Joshua's throat to the dawn where we walked out united and unstoppable. This story is about betrayal and truth, about weapons learning to become warriors on their own terms, about love that breaks through the strongest programming. I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? What part of the world are you in right now as you finish my story? And tell me, what was your favorite moment? Was it when the bond first struck and shattered everything I believed? When Joshua stopped us from completing the bond until I was truly ready? When the memories flooded through and I finally saw the truth? Or when I stood before Kale's hunters and reclaimed my real name? Drop a comment below. Share where you're from and which moment hit you hardest. Your story matters too, and I want to hear it. Until we meet again in the next chapter of this fight for truth and justice, stay fierce, stay free, stay true to who you are beneath what others tried to make you. Nissa Thornwood, maid of Alpha Joshua Blackthorn, daughter of Marcus and Elena, sister to Finn who died a hero, and weapon no more.